So let's continue our third part. We have stopped here. Mistaken assumptions about BOP or bottom of the pyramid. So bottom of the pyramid means countries that are categorized as low income countries. Okay. So when we say low income countries, then people misperceive these low income countries as countries that have no money. Okay, that is just a mistaken assumption. Okay, but if you see the aggregate buying power of these low income countries, it's very high. Their consumption is very high. So low income country or bottom of the pyramid countries doesn't mean that they don't have money. And the other mistaken assumption is the poor are too concerned with basic needs to waste, in quotation, money on non-essential goods. That's also another misconception. Okay, mostly these low-income countries or countries, this we call at the bottom of the pyramid, they invest and they buy luxury products. Okay, because even though they are poor to buy a house, they buy some TVs, luxury TVs, stoves, and other home appliances. Okay, so there is a misconception that they are only concerned about their basic needs. Okay, and the other misconception or mistaken assumption is entering developing market is fruitless because goods there are cheap to make a profit. And that this is also another mistaken assumption because, as I've said, the aggregate buying power of low-income countries is very high, okay? Because they have a big number of population and their aggregate is a summation of the buying power of these countries is high. The other mistaken assumption is people in bottom of the pyramid countries cannot use technology, and that is also false. Okay, so if you go to any remote areas, for example, in Africa, you can find cell phones. Okay, so that is another mistaken assumption. The other is global companies doing business in bottom of the pyramid countries will be criticized for exploiting the poor, and that is also another misconception. It's good for this bottom of the pyramid countries that global companies are there because it makes it easy for them to buy products from these global companies. Okay, so these are just some mistaken assumptions about low income. So when we say low income, it doesn't mean that these are very poor and they do not buy anything. Okay, so how about the high income countries? So high income countries are countries with GNI per capita of more than 12,000 per year. Okay, so they are also known as advanced, developed, and industrialized, or post-industrial countries. Okay, so so many countries are categorized under this. For example, the US you can say they are high-income countries. Okay, so and South Korea is also categorized under high-income countries. Okay. Because the GNI per capita of South Korea is way higher than 12,000, because as I've said, it is more than 38,000 per year. Okay, so the characteristics here are they have sustained economic growth through disciplined innovation. Okay, so disciplined innovation means it's not just some random invention. Okay, And the economic growth here, a country to be categorized as high income should be sustainable or sustained economic growth. Okay, households have extremely high ownership levels of basic products. Okay, like for example in Korea, I have heard that there are almost more than 23 million cars in Korea, which means one car is allocated for almost two Koreans if we take the population size of Korea to be around 55 million. Okay, so household has extremely high ownership levels. But if you go to, for example, some low-income countries, one car would be allocated for 10 million people. Okay, so they are categorized as importance of information processing and exchange. As I've said, this high-income countries they do not only focus on invention, but they focus on innovation and sustained growth. And this sustained growth can be possible through a huge information processing, and creation of knowledge. Okay, so knowledge over capital, intellectual property over machine technology, scientists and professionals over engineers and semi-skilled workers. So in these high-income countries, you mostly find scientists than just professional or semi-skilled workers. And these high-income countries are future-oriented. So they do things considering the future or taking the future into account. And the importance of interpersonal relationship is very high in high-income countries. Okay, so you can categorize. So 12,000, around 12,000 or more GNI per capita is high-income country. So there are so many countries categorized under high-income countries, including Korea. Okay, and there are this G7. Also, you have heard of Group of Seven or G7 countries. So G7 countries consists of US, Japan, Germany, France, Britain, Canada, and Italy. Okay, so what is the goal of G7 is to have sustainable growth and prosperity. Okay, so actually Russia has also joined this G7, and G7 used to be called G8 because Russia is or used to be also a member of this group. Okay, so for now, because Russia was taken out of this group because of in 2014 because of Crimea, then now we only have the G7, okay, which consists of these 7 countries. And here you see that NGOs often protest the meetings of world leaders like G7. And I hope you understand the reason. So these NGOs are there because they claim that the environment is highly affected by this huge economy countries, and they are not doing what is expected from them in regard to protecting the environment. That's why these NGOs mostly protest G7 or G8 meetings. Okay. So as I've said, Russia was a member. So Russia joined this G7 in 1998, and the name was changed from G7 to G8. But unfortunately, Russia's membership to the G7 group was suspended in 2014 after they have annexed Crimea, which was not part of Russia before. So again, so Russia was suspended from this group, and now we have G7, not G8. But still, Russia remains one of the G20 member countries. Okay. So what are the G20? Okay. G20s are 20 countries, including the EU. Okay. So this G20 is established in 1999, and it consists of the finance minister, central bank governors of these 19 countries, plus the EU, okay, the European Union. So included in this G20 are countries like Argentina, Brazil, India, Indonesia, and Turkey. Okay, so Turkey has recently joined the G20. Russia remains the member of the G20, but as I've said, it's no more a member of G7. It is just excluded from this group, G7. Okay, and the other group is called the OECD. Okay, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So this works in close tie with World Bank and World Trade. Okay, so there are 35 nations under OECD, and it's post Second World War European origin, and it is based in Paris. Okay, so for example, US and Canada have joined this OECD in 1961. Japan joined OECD in 1964. And what is the objective of OECD? It's just to promote economic growth and social well-being, okay, in the world. So it's not only limited, the operation of OECD is not limited to 35 nations, but their objective is to promote growth and social well-being throughout the world. Okay, so it focuses on world trade, global issues, labor market, and deregulations, and also anti-bribery conventions. Okay, so they work in close ties with world trade to promote economic growth and social well-being in different countries in the world. And let's talk about product saturation levels. Product saturation level means the percentage of potential buyers or householders who own a product. Okay, so when a country is a high income country, the product saturation level decreases. Okay, so the ownership, as I've said, if you go to Africa, one car is allocated for 10 million, because for example, in a country where there are 100 million people, you might find only 1 million cars, or you might find 10 million cars. So which means one car is allocated for 1 million people. Okay, so if you take, for example, India, 700 million debit cards are there. So, or we can say 700. So the population of India is about 1.2 billion, right? So out of this 1.2 billion people, 700 millions of them have debit cards, but only 700,000 retailers use card readers. Okay, so the businesses, they do not have enough card readers, but there are so many people who own debit cards. And card readers, for example, one machine is allocated for 119 in Europe. So you can compare the Indian and the European ownership and allocation of machine, card reader machines. One reader per 25 people in the US, okay? One per 60 people in China. So you can say the product saturation levels in the US are much more better compared to Europe and China. For example, autos or cars, 8 cars per 1,000 Indians, 200 cars per 1,000 in Russia, 565 cars per 1,000 in Germany, right? So the product saturation levels tells the economic level of a country, okay? So high income countries have lower product saturation levels to like per the population, okay? So let's talk about the balance of payment. So balance of payment, as I've tried to mention in the overview session, trade balance and balance of payment are two different things, okay? Trade balance talks about trade deficit or trade surplus. So in trade balance, we talk about export and import only, okay? And that is called the current account, okay? But balance of payment includes current account and capital account together. And capital account means foreign direct investment or any other portfolio investment, okay? So balance of payment records all of the economic transactions between the residents of a country and the rest of the world, okay? And in balance of payment, we have current account, which is concerned about merchandise and service trade and humanitarian aid, and capital account, which records all long-term direct investment, portfolio investment, and capital flows, okay? So when we say a country's balance of payment is bad, we are referring to the current account and also the capital account. And this is very determinant variable or measure of the economy of a country, okay, than trade balance or balance of trade, okay? So trade deficit, you know, is negative current account, okay? And or you say negative trade balance, and trade surplus means positive trade balance or positive current account, okay? So I want you to differentiate what's current account and capital account, okay? So here, these are seven, list of 5 leading exporters and importers in the world, okay? As we have already said, China is a leading exporter, and it is number 2 importer. The US is leading exporter and number 1 importer, okay? But you can see the value of import and exports here. So this is a 2015 data, and this shows the 5 big economies in the world, okay? China, the United States, Germany, Japan, and the Netherlands, and also United Kingdom. So these are the leading exporters and importers, okay? Okay, let's talk about international finance. So those of you who have already studied international financial management, you might be familiar with what we mean by spot market, forward market, futures market, okay? So I will not go into detail to explain this. I will try to simply explain this concept is in international finance, okay? So foreign exchange allow companies to do business globally with different countries, okay? So if a country wants to buy products from Korea or produced in Korea, then they have to buy Korean currency, right? That is called a foreign exchange market, right? And if Korea has a high exchange, a high export, it means that there are so many companies that would like to buy Korean currency to buy this product, okay? So this strengthens the value of Korean money, okay? So exchange risk occurs when the value of a currency changes as it is traded. So the thing is, when companies buy products from each other, they don't usually pay it immediately. So if they pay it immediately, then that is called a spot market. And in the spot market, there is no problem with exchange rate, okay? Because you pay based on the current exchange rate. So there is no problem. But companies usually sign a contract. For example, company A and company B are trading. Company A is buying some products from company B. So they sign a contract that company A will sign a contract saying, I will pay this amount of money that I bought a product for after a year. This is a forward contract, okay? But the problem is, unless you sign a contract on what percentage of exchange rate or what exchange rate are you going to trade with, then it's very risky, right? Because let's say, and you know the time value of money, right? The Korean won, 1,000 Korean won today is cheaper, I mean, is stronger than 1,000 Korean won after a year, right? Because because of time value of money, the currency gets cheap and cheap and cheap, right? And exchange rates also fluctuate. For example, if you take $1 exchange rate for Korean won, today it might be 1,100. Tomorrow it might be 1,200, okay? And after a year, it might be 1,500. So exchange rates fluctuate. So unless you sign a contract and lock the exchange rate, then it is very risky for you to trade with other nations, okay? So forward market is when you agree on the amount of exchange rate that you will pay for your exchange or your transaction. So you might say, I will pay you after a year, but with exchange rate of Korean won of 1,250, something like that. And after a year, if the exchange rate goes above, like if the exchange rate was is going to be 1,500, then you will benefit, okay? Because had it been you haven't locked this exchange rate, then you would have paid with 1,500, right? But because you locked the exchange rate with 1,250, then it's not a problem because you are expected to pay only with the contract that you have signed the exchange rate with, okay? So this kind of contract is called a forward contract. But the spot market is when you pay with the exchange rate of today, so current exchange rate, okay? So currency market participants include country's central bank, companies that convert foreign currency into their home currencies, and currency speculators. So some investors, some investments, they speculate, okay? For example, they speculate based on the economic growth of a country. They might say, for example, after a year, $1 will be equal to 1,500 Korean won, okay? So they do this. This is financial engineering, right? So if they see that the value of Korean won will decrease after a year, then they will sign a contract, or they buy products and sign a contract as much as they get a lower than 1,500, okay? So anyways, it's a contract that you agree with your trading partners, and also you fix exchange rates, and we call this fixing of exchange rate hedging, or locking the exchange rate, okay? So the other is devaluation of currency, okay? So you know that China and South Korea have trade surplus, okay? Trade surplus means high export than import. So China has the highest export as compared to its import. And Korea has also higher export than its import, okay? So the Chinese export is increased because China regularly devaluates its currency, okay? But the Korean surplus came from not from devaluation of a currency, but because it is imposed on it, because countries would like to buy products from Korea, okay? So devaluating a currency will create problems, okay? That's why, that's the reason why the US and the Chinese are in trade war, right? Because when China devaluates its currency, it means that products in China are now cheaper as compared to products in the US or products in other parts of the world. Okay, so which means now investors or buyers will go for Chinese products than American or other countries' products, because Chinese products are now cheaper because China has devalued its currency, and this creates problem in the world economy. Okay, so that's a problem. So mercantilism or competitive currency politics are used where countries do not allow their currency to fluctuate. So countries usually try to lock their exchange rates, and they don't want this exchange rate to fluctuate. Okay, so mostly countries use a fixed exchange rates. And the opposite of devaluation is revaluation. Okay, revaluation is when a nation knows its currency to strengthen. Okay, so devaluation and depreciation, revaluation and appreciation. I want you to differentiate this. Devaluation is intentional, okay, but depreciation is because of the market. So devaluation, you intentionally devalue your currency. Depreciation, the currency devaluates because of the market, okay? And the same thing for revaluation and appreciation, okay? And so for those of you who, I think you will study this in international financial management, okay? So, and the other thing is foreign exchange makes it possible to do business across the boundary of national currency, right? So if there is no foreign exchange market, then you cannot exchange your currency to other countries, right? So it's not possible. So we need foreign exchange markets to undertake international trade, okay? Currency of various countries are traded for both immediate, which is a spot market, and future or forward delivery. Okay, as I've said, forward markets. Okay, or forward contracts. Then currency risk adds turbulence to global commerce. So it is clear that if a currency is fluctuating very much, then that's not good for the economy. Okay, so it creates turbulence in the global commerce, because there might be companies that lose all their money because of fluctuating exchange rates. Okay. So here you can see the foreign exchange market dynamics. So supply and demand interaction. Country sells more goods than it buys. So when we say countries sell more goods than it buys, it means that there is a greater demand for their currency, right? So when you sell more products, it means that there are more buyers, right? And if there are more buyers, it means that they want your currency to buy your products. So this means that there is a greater demand for the currency. And there is a greater demand for a currency means that the currency value will appreciate, right? So that is called appreciation. And you can see here there is exchange rate risk and gains in foreign transactions. So for example, 1.25 euro is equal to $1. So for Europe's US sailors, it is this much. For European, it is this much, okay? But for 1,100,000, it will be this much, but the European has to pay this when the currency value is strengthened, okay? So this amount will be paid when the value of the currency become stronger. So anyways, this is just the exchange rate dynamics. Then there is market exposure, which refers to the impact of currency fluctuation on the present value of the company's financial performance. As I've said, companies usually use forward contractors because they don't want to lose money. Actually, they might also gain, but there is a big uncertainty in that. So in order to decrease this uncertainty, you lock you lock exchange rates, and you try to trade based on the exchange rate that you have agreed on in your contract. Okay, so this occurs when sales are in foreign currency. So for example, Nestle generates 98% of sales outside home country, and most of these countries might have a fluctuating currency, exchange rates, okay? So which might affect the economy of this company. Also, there are Eurozone companies, there are AG, DP, so there are so many global companies, and these companies always try to manage these foreign exchange rates, okay? So numerous techniques can be used, as we have said. One technique to reduce this exchange rate risk is to hedge or to use these contracts to lock currency exchange rates. So hedging involves balancing the risk of loss in one currency with corresponding gain in another currency. So I will not go into detail, but sometimes you lose, sometimes you gain, okay? So it might get in opposite to your predictions. So you might have predicted that the value of the currency will decrease, but in fact it might increase. So that might get you in loss. But the main reason companies use this contract is to decrease the uncertainty, okay? Because what if the value of the money has depreciated very much, and you might lose all your investments, okay? So forward contracts set the price of the exchange rate at some point in the future to eliminate this kinds of risks, okay? Okay, so this is all for this chapter. A little bit of financial management issues, but I want you to, for example, you can go to Google and write forward contracts, okay? And you can listen to a video on Investopedia. So there is a website called Investopedia. So Investopedia will explain it very easily for you about these concepts, okay? So if you have any questions, let me know. This is all I have for today, okay? So let me check. I think I have a question here. Is amount, if the amount is locked for exchange rate, and even though it doesn't have been transferred, or it may be still in process, then also we are eligible for that locking rate? Yes. Whether it decreased or increased, you have to pay according to the rate that you have locked. That's why we say sometimes you lose, sometimes you gain. If the value of the money appreciated, you lose. If the value of money depreciated, then you gain, okay? Is there any provision for salaried foreign employees to transfer the money to the home country in cheaper exchange rate? Because he is not native employee. I have no idea about that. I don't have any idea about how the banks in Korea or the banks in other parts of the world treat this. But when you are an investor and you are buying products, so this is a contract, is an agreement between you and another company, right? And this agreement is signed to pay in the future, okay? So it consists of two parties to get involved in the transaction, okay? So I'm not sure about the individual transaction of money with the banks, okay? So this is all about our second chapter. Let me know if you have any questions on the portal. And by the way, I have already uploaded this second chapter to the portal. So you can find the PPT files under resources, learning resources, okay, lecture resources, okay. So go to the portal under lecture resources, you will find chapter 1 and chapter 2 of this course, Global Marketing, okay. So let me know if you have any questions on the portal, and that's all for today. I will see you all next week. So have a good day, okay. Bye. Thank you for having me.